Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley. Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast. We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived. So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we have got a great guest on today because, having lost your brother, you certainly have a sweet spot for sibling loss. And you did your research on it. And I know when you did your study on it, I don't know, how many years ago was it, Heidi?
I started writing my dissertation in 2000. I did it in 2001 and 2.
And you did on loss of a sibling, right?
I did my doctoral dissertation on the sudden death of a sibling. I think I graduated in 2003. And the person that we are having on today, Rayna Godfrey, I have known for a long, long time. And I think she was, when I first wanted to do my doctoral dissertation on this, I called her. I don't know if you remember, Rayna. And I talked to you about it. And you were awesome. And you sent me some of your research that you had done about after your brother had died on sibling loss. And I know you did your doctoral dissertation on the death of a sibling when you're an adult, right? I know Wesley wasn't an adult, but you were 20.
Right. Yeah, he was 16 and I was 20. And really, when I went to find something to help me, there was nothing on sibling loss, certainly nothing on sibling loss at my age. And so decided, being in a position I could write my dissertation on this. And so I was, not happy that you had had the same experience, but was glad that you were going to contribute to the research as well. And so happy to share the little that I had found at that point.
Dr. Rayna, she is a licensed psychologist in private practice in Jacksonville, Florida, and she specializes in grief and loss. She's a member of the Association for Death Education and Counseling, and she has presented at international conferences and workshops on the experience of losing a sibling in adulthood, and she's written a lot about it as well. As I said, I've cited to her many times, and we have a lot in common because Rayna and I were both 20 years old when our teenage brothers died in car accidents. Yes. Wesley.
We were very close. He's my only sibling, and he was a junior in high school when I was a junior in college. And we had talked on the phone the night before, and he was telling me about a date that he'd had, and I was trying to rush and go do something college but the last words we ever said to each other were, "I love you." And we ended that phone call, and then it was the next day that he was in a car accident and killed instantly. And certainly that has been the most defining moment of my life so far. And it was incredibly difficult to grieve him. My parents were already divorced at that point. They'd been divorced for 5 years. And he and I had really been what we considered the family unit. It was sort of us against them. And so it was difficult to figure out how to navigate that and find my own way when he had been my companion. He would have been the one to help me with anything that I had been going through. So it was a huge loss.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And that's why I when I thought about what I should name the show, I thought I'm going to name it Life Without My Brother. Because I know over the years, following you, talking to you, and seeing you at conferences and following you on Facebook, I know what your brother has meant to you. Because you keep these memories so alive and so in the forefront, which I love. What kinds of things were not helpful early on?
I think a big thing with sibling loss is we're kind of the forgotten mourners, and the people who get the attention are the parents. I had so many people say, "Oh, your brother died. That must be so hard for your parents," and just dismissed that I was grieving very significantly. And a lot of times, if it's not the parents, it will be if the sibling was married and had their own kids, it would be their family that gets the attention. And so really, don't ignore the sibling and don't dismiss that they are having a very, very significant grief experience, that they've had a huge loss. A lot of times people think that, because you've left the childhood home that you're no longer as close, and that's not true.
Okay, Rayna, can you please say that again? I love that point. People think because you left the childhood home.
Right. People think because you've left the childhood home that you're no longer living together, that you're not close, or that the sibling influence is not as strong, and that's not true. And so really recognizing that the sibling relationship is the longest relationship that we have. And it is important to us across the lifespan. And losing a sibling at any age is a huge loss.
I love that, because I've definitely found that to be the case in my own situation. Because Scott and I weren't living together under the same roof, I felt like society assumed that it wasn't that significant, and that, well, you know, you were living away from home in college, so you probably weren't that impacted by it. And sometimes, I mean, for me and Scott, we were like you and Wesley, we always had a close relationship. But I hear some people say, you know what, we were even closer as we got older than we were when we were younger. So it was even more significant. So I like that point that you're making. So did you feel like you got support in college? I mean, did people obviously didn't know your brother, right? In college? And what was that like? What was that like, being in college and being like, I was in a sorority and I was fun and et cetera. And I know in my own situation, my friends really didn't understand, because none of my friends in college had ever had a sibling death. So I felt like initially I got support, but after a few weeks they were like, okay, Heidi, you got to be fun now. It's college time. So I didn't know how that was for you.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I definitely had some people who knew Wes, and he had been to visit me like on Siblings Day, and, you know, had spent the night, and, you know, hung out with some of my friends. And I had a great showing of people who came to his funeral. But like you said, it's like you get back into, within a week or two, and everyone expects you to be, back on track. And for me, I left, he died in October, and, we finished the semester in December, and then January, I went to France for a semester abroad. And so really was, disconnected from the whole support system, and which I say it was a very profound and positive experience on my grief, to be able to go to France and grieve there, and grieve him deeply, and be fulfilling my dream that I had had since I was a child. At the same time, I was sort of living my nightmare. But in terms of college support, there was no support from the university. I had a professor tell me, if you can, in fact, prove to me that your brother did die, I will let you rewrite this paper.
Oh my gosh.
And I won't say on here what my response to him was. I think the dean, my best friend and roommate told the dean what classes I had, and she alerted the professors, but for some reason didn't alert this one. And I only missed less than a week of school. Because my dad said he had lost his father when he was in college, and he said, oh, the best thing was to get back in, just go back and
on the horse, right?
Yeah, get back on the horse, focus on your studies. That's going to be the best thing. So he died on a Wednesday, and I went home that night, and I was back in school on the following Tuesday.
Wow. Let me say something about parents. I love listening to you two talk about this, because it's like I'm kind of looking through the window. But boy, we hate to see our kids suffer, and seeing them do some routine things. What could be better? I mean, because we are such a mess and so totally lost. That hopefully somebody's got a strand, and I think you guys pick that up and probably discount your own experience trying to be that strand of strength, So carry on. I'm loving it.
That's a good point, Mom, because I'm wondering too, once Dad said go back to school, if you felt like, I need to be strong for my parents. I need to do this because I'm worried. They're going through there. I'm worried about them, so I do need to figure out I'm going to do this. Was that?
Well, there's a piece of that, and certainly I've heard a lot of siblings say that to me, and I've had even some of the ones that I interviewed for my dissertation say, I put my grief on hold. And even the clients that I see now, I just had one person last week say, you know, I have to go over every day and make sure my mom is showering and making sure, you know, and it's just overwhelming me. And so I think for me, I had a very good experience in that my mom said to me, because again, the difficult part was grieving separately. We weren't grieving as a unit. And so I felt very torn and very pulled to be there for both of them, even though they weren't together. But my mom said to me, she's like, let's make a pact that we will always talk to each other and share and not worry that we're going to make the other one sad. So she's like, I don't ever want you to feel like, you know, you're going to make me sad if you call me and tell me you're having a bad day. And so my mom and I had that agreement that we would talk to each other no matter what. And my dad was less communicative, but still, you know, very, very connected. And when it was time for me to go to France, you know, they've just lost a child. Right. And the first Gulf War broke out. Wow. 2 weeks before I was supposed to go. And my dad said to me, I cannot lose my other child. I've lost one. I can't lose the other one. And I said, if you tell me not to go, I won't go. Mm-hmm. But he knew deep down that I would not have survived had I not been able to go. And he said, I would never tell you that. You need to do this. Just go and be safe. And so he was really able to put aside his own grief, his own fears, and let me fly and be the person that I needed to be. So I'm very, very grateful for that. But I think a lot of times siblings don't have that experience with it.
Yeah, as a parent, I can say you are so terrified that something else could happen because it's so out of control, and you know, you're looking for control, and you know,
yeah,
kinds of things just can't happen.
Sometimes parents get overprotective. Mm-hmm. And you know, young adulthood is the time that we're separating and individuating, and parents will pull kids back in because exactly for the reason that you're talking about. They're terrified that another child is going to die, and so they become, you know, they start to micromanage them, which is not good at that point. So I love that your parents were able to say that. And was it good to kind of get away and have a totally different experience in France and just kind of be in a very different place?
Yes, and I have to say, you know, it's great, you know, when you're living someplace where everyone's kind of sullen and drawn in. No one expects you to be like optimistic and happy. No one asks you, how are you? And you can like scowl at people. so that was good. But also because, like I said, this had been my dream since I was a child. And it was a very profound experience to experience your nightmare and your dream at the same time.
Yeah.
And to be able to have that, and to, I mean, it's really opened me up to, you know, life is both, you know, the good and the bad sometimes at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so it was very healing for me to just be able to go and be and do and speak French, and then, you know, come home.
Well, I like what you're saying, because when Anderson Cooper's brother died by suicide, he decided to go to a war-torn area and be a journalist there, because he wanted the environment, the external environment, to reflect what he was feeling internally. Yeah. He wanted, just exactly what you're saying, because, you know, it's kind of insulting when we've had a sibling death to go outside and have the sun shining and the birds singing and everything being positive. When you're wanting to say to the world, don't you realize what has just happened?
Right.
You know, it should be storming right now.
Right.
Heidi, how about you going on Outward Bound? That was pretty incredible.
That was very profound. I went on Outward Bound 3 months after my brother died in Denver, and I know that you're familiar with that because I know you used to live there. And I went on a month-long program, and it was very, very hard. And I cried, and people thought I was crying because it was hard, but I was crying because I missed Scott. Yeah. And so at the end of it, it was a good thing, because I realized, you know what, I just got through my brother's death, and I just got through this. I'm going to be able to get through life one day at a time without him. I don't know how, but I'm going to be able to do it. So in your research, Rayna, and I know you've talked to hundreds and thousands of siblings over the years, and your own experience, what has been helpful? What helps siblings when a brother or sister dies?
I think that, you know, number one, it's that recognition and validation that, yes, you have lost someone significant, that your grief counts, that this is profound. and giving people time and space to do it on their own schedule. A lot of people have said, you know, it's not helpful when they rush me. It's like, oh, well, it was just your brother. You should be over it by now. But really, the people who have been able to say, yes, you're grieving, you're sad, and just being present with the sibling is important. And I think also allowing bereaved siblings to have their memories, and to, you know, it's like, you know, when you're with friends and people start telling funny stories of, oh yeah, you know, I used to do this when I was a kid with my brother. And the people who are able to let you do that, I have to say, are very healing. I know when I had the experience of being with friends and we were talking about something and I could say, oh yeah, you know, my brother and I did this. And it was just a normal part of the conversation. And no one freaked out because I was talking about, you know, somebody who had died. It was just, yeah, this is your memory. It will always be your memory. And it's a happy memory. And so being able to create that space and give that person the space that they need to remember, cry, laugh, whatever it is.
I would love to hear you two talk a little bit about social media and how you feel about that's made a change in the grief and loss world. I have to tell you, my brother, who is older than I, and, you know, an older person dying, it's a little disconcerting to get, he died about 5 years ago, to get his happy birthday on the internet for me. I don't know. And I got another person who died that I know, and he used to send out a weekly little note of encouragement, and his family's still sending it out. And it, you know, it's been 3 years. I don't know. Talk to me about social media.
Well, I think it's an interesting concept. You know, certainly that was way before our time with Wesley and Scott. But certainly the way that we are so much more connected, I think it can be both helpful and unhelpful, you know, depending. And I mean, there are ways that it helps you, you know, continue those bonds. You can have those memories. The memories pop up. Oh, on this day, you know, 3 years ago, we were doing this. Or it gives you a place to, you know, put out a little notice that, you know, that lots of people are going to see. And so I think, you know, it's one of those things. It's how you use it to make meaning. It's how you use it to do those restorative loss pieces that you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I agree with you, Rayna, that it's both positive and negative. I think one of the things I hear is that it's positive when we talk about Wesley and Scott, and then people will, you know, if we put up stuff about missing them, all of a sudden people will come and they'll comment and they'll say either that they're thinking of us, or they'll give us stories about our brothers, or, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, people still remember. This is amazing. Yeah. The downside I've heard is when nowadays, and this is before our time, like you said, people have sites and they die, and at first everybody's on them. Mm-hmm. But over time, less and less people are on them. And I hear family members saying it's hurtful because after a while, people stop visiting the Facebook pages and those Instagram, etc. And you can see the dwindling, and it's stressful for people to see that.
Yeah. Well, and you figure, I mean, it's a parallel process to what happens, right, in real time, in that everybody gathers around for the funeral and they're there for you and feeding you afterwards, and then things just kind of dwindle. And when you feel like you need the most support, that's when everyone else has moved on. And so it's like that process is repeating itself, you know, with social media, but kind of an in-your-face.
Absolutely. And you know what I've been really interested in, and I'd like your take on this, how impactful Scott has been in my life and still is.
Yes.
Like, I'm blown away. Like some of the, like, for example, your picture the other day, your portrait. Tell everybody about your portrait. I loved it.
So I was taking this oil painting class. I've never done anything like this before, and just started doing it. And we had, you know, we did still life, and then we did landscape. And then I actually missed the class on portrait painting because I was at ADEC. And so I thought, well, and they had a live model come in. They had this old guy named Pablo come in. And I thought, well, you know, I'm still going to do the portrait, even though I'm not in class. And I decided to paint Wesley. And so I have his old school photo, his last school photo from his junior year. And it was such an intimate and tender process. And it was unexpectedly emotional. Like I cried through, I painted him twice. And the first one, I cried through the whole thing. It just felt very intimate to look at his picture in a way that, I hadn't really stared at this picture in a long, long time. And I remember when he first died, looking at it and just wishing him to be alive and staring at the photo and thinking, how can you be dead? And all those memories came up again. But it was also interesting that, as I painted him, and I was painting his hair, it felt like I was almost reaching up and brushing his hair out of his face, or, adjusting it before he walked out, to go on a date. And it was a really beautiful experience. And the first one, it looks kind of like him.
I have to say.
I mean, I was pretty pleased since I'd never done it before. And so then I sent a picture to my teacher, and he gave me a couple of things of feedback. And so I painted it again, and it looks much more like him. But even then, the process there was, I found myself, the first time I painted him, there was no frustration. There was no, I can be a perfectionist. All of that was, I just let that go and painted him for the experience of it. And then the second time, because I was trying to make it better, I had this goal, and I kind of got clenched up, and I thought to myself, I just need to capture him. I've got to capture him right. And I took a breath, and I realized, that's how we feel about our siblings. It's like we just want to capture them. We just want to bring them back. We just want them to be here. And so when I let go of that sort of striving, it's like, he's going to be here. However, he's going to be here. And so let that go, and let the, painting go as it would. And so then I was posting it on Facebook. And this is a great thing with social media, is I have a place of, I can share this, and I can share this profound experience. And my friends were overwhelmingly positive, and, giving it a thumbs up, and loving my process of it. And I shared that process in class when we went last week and had our feedback class, showed the portraits and explained that to them. So it was very powerful.
When did your brother die? What year?
1990.
Okay, so all these years later, you're still very connected to him. I just want everyone to know this. You remember him all the time, and he's still very present in your life, which I love, because people are afraid about that. So I know that you're in private practice, and I know that you do grief and loss. Where can people get a hold of you? Where can they find you?
So I have a website. It's www.raynagodfrey.com. And that tells more about me. It has my contact info. You can call me. You can send me an email. Everything's right there on the site.
Great. Thank you, Rayna, so much. And thank you for building so much awareness and being like a pioneer in the field of grief and loss, because you certainly were there for me when I started embarking on this journey. And I appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you.
And I want to thank Heidi and Rayna for enlightening me. And I love to hear you guys talk about your brothers. And I hope that everyone who's watching this will tell people about it who've had sibling loss, because it is a profound loss, and for parents to have more understanding about these losses. And Rayna and Heidi and I certainly want to remind everybody that you've lost hope. If you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own. And God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.